Hey, people, I am joined here today with Indie Fantasy Club. We're going to be talking about trad versus indie. If you want to talk about your channel for a quick second and what you do.
For sure. Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on the channel. We are the Indie Fantasy Club basically is just a channel dedicated to featuring indie fantasy authors and just really highlighting self-publishing as a whole and showing that they are, just as talented as traditionally published books, but that oftentimes just don't get as much of a spotlight on them. So that's kind of like the main goal of the channel that I have, but we also do some writing workshops and talk about a few other things, but that's the main focus.
Right, right. So what we're going to be going through today is we're going to be doing traditionally publishing versus indie publishing. Almost all the different types of books that you can find will be available. So that's like the web serials will be manga, graphic novels, traditionally published epics, ancient myths. It's all going to be there. The categories we are going to be going through today are the best world building, the best characters from the villains, heroes, and the more gray things, best magic systems, and the best plot. And then we'll debate about where it is overall. Would really appreciate it if you guys could let us know in the comments down below which one of us win in each category, or your own thoughts. Just let us know. So without further ado then, so best world building. Would you like to go, or would you want me to take it?
You know what? Let's hear what you have to say. What would you consider the best world building for traditionally published fantasy?
So I had to think a little bit about this one because there's so many to choose from, right? I was having some difficulty because what I wanted to do was talk about the Wandering In more, but it's an indie like web serial thing. But when I inevitably had to focus on, like, a lot of people, they select like Middle Earth or First Law, or like Song of Ice and Fire is like, there's a reason why it's always at the top of the list. There's a reason why Lord of the Rings is always at the top of the list. Mm-hmm. I figured I would go for something a little bit different, and I would talk about China Miéville's Baslag trilogy.
Okay.
So Baslag is it's part of the new weird, right? China Miéville, he writes a lot of surreal fiction. It's a lot of like just out there, completely alien type stuff. And instead of focusing on like vast histories and the linguistics and the names and the genealogies of everything, like more classical fantasy does, what China Miéville does is he focuses and zooms in on one particular point in the whole world. The entirety of Perdita Street Station takes place in one city, right? And he focuses on making the city as lived in as possible. Every district, every neighborhood, every ghetto, right? From the slums to like the upper class, and it's all there. And It is populated by there's no elves, right? It's just you got the cacti folk, you have Garuda, who are these like bird things, you have the insect folk. There's it's just an infinite amount of strange, weird stuff, right? There's the remade, which are basically people or other creatures that have been built into machines or grafted like body parts onto them, and the entire world is gilded in this steampunk aesthetic, right? So it's like, it is a steampunk story. And so it's all of this. So it's all the weird alien cultures that have been piled on top of each other with the kind of like chaotic social structure of an industrial era society. And it's all of that has been built into the body of a like dead god carcass, right? So it's like there's bones everywhere, and all the trains and everything are built into the bones, right?
Wow.
And
you almost sold me on the book on that line alone.
It's really, really like New Krobazon is a crazy setting for a book, right? And it takes a street view approach to it. Like the main characters are, it's like, a bunch of like left-leaning kind of like socialites, artists, scientists, and random like outcast people who just like, they have an apartment. And so it's like, it's not like, like the mayor is a character, right? But you only get like 4 chapters of him getting the top-down view, right? And so you have all of this that is all built together, and it's really messy. It's a powder keg just like waiting to boil over. And there's just like multiple layers of like crime. There's the fact that the state militia they're not uniformed, right? They dress as civilians. And they're always listening. They're always present. There's paranoia everywhere, right? It's just It's an absolutely fantastic book, and for people who enjoy like an alternative approach to world building, I think like I don't think enough people talk about it, you know. Because
let me ask you this: so when you're looking for good world building, are you looking for like complexity to the world building? Because you mentioned it's just like a city, but obviously it's explored in a lot of depth.
right.
But when I say complexity, do you like things that have a Malazan type of a complexity where like they don't really hold your hand, you're just thrown into this world? Or do you like it as it's kind of builds as you go? Like what makes it so immersive for your reading experience?
I think in a story, you know, I'm gonna say it again. In a story like the Wandering Inn, it's a case of like, yeah, you don't know a lot about the world and you learn about it as the character does, right? Kind of like step by step, piece by piece. Bass Lag, Perdido Street Station, it's not like that. Things are barely explained, but it's like everything is treated as mundane as possible by the characters who live there, right? Even though it's like, oh yeah, that's a person with like a scarab for a head, and it's like that's just in the bar with me, right? It's like it's treated mundane, and so in that way, I'm kind of brought through it. I think it's a case of if the world building, if the approach, like sometimes the approach can contrast the story, and sometimes it can lend itself to it, and I think it's just a case of like what works in any given case and what you're trying to focus on and what you're trying to dial in. Like if it contrasts in a way that's like pleasant, sure, great, right? But if it's in a way that like disrupts and distracts, then that can kind of cause a disunity, right?
For sure. Like you don't want to get too in the weeds because then it just can get boring or distracting. And I do like books that have that focus on just like one village or one town. Like the books that I can think off the top of my head is like The Sword of Kaigan is just one village, super deep. You've got Petition, which is just one village. Again, a lot of depth. So I do think that, you know, there's depth with world building. If you want to focus on that one area, you can explore a lot of different cultural aspects of it. And then there's the breadth of world building, which is like obviously end of the world type stuff.
Yeah. That's the like most important thing I feel almost is if you can feel the world change as the plot happens, right?
Absolutely.
That's one of the biggest things. That's always like I love it when that happens.
I agreed. Even if it's on a small scale, feeling the significance of what's happening with the characters and like you said, even the mundane things having a purpose, I think really makes the world building experience really advanced.
So what's yours? What did you select?
Well, that was a good pick. I haven't read it, so I can't really dispute any of the claims there, which I think was also a great strategy.
That's one of the big. That's my move. That's the best part. Neither of us are gonna have read anything that
exactly. We can just make up whatever we want at this point. Yeah. But the one that I chose for world building kind of is on the other spectrum. Where you went with depth, I decided to go more with breadth. So I chose the Kings of Paradise by Richard Nell. And the things that I love about this story is just that you get the world from two different perspectives. So you get one perspective that is just a frozen wasteland with barbarians, very harsh. But at the same time, like there is a really rigid religious structure where women are the ruling class in that society. Right. Okay. Exactly. Despite the fact that these men are just like really base and brutal and barbaric, they still defer to this matriarchy, which is like really interesting to read about and learn. And then on the complete other side of the world is like a tropical like civilization, like tropical island paradise that's like more advanced. They have politics, they have just like more structure to their civilization and their society. So you get that really harsh contrast between just this like developed society that has its own problems with politics and kings and different kingdoms kind of clashing with each other.
Right.
And then you have this other society that's just like so sparse and so barren. And yet they also have conflicts and you get to kind of experience that. But just seeing the different societies contrast each other was just so much fun to read. And the other cool thing is like these two societies don't even know that the other exists. So it's not like they even interact with each other till the very end of the book. So yeah, just super broad scope. It touches on a bunch of things, like from religion to culture to, character beliefs, like to prophecies. So it just has so much to it in that respect. And I just really think that it has such great contrast that highlights the depth of the world. Because you even get a taste of like a third country that's to the north that you kind of feel is pressing downward and has that like pressure of encroachment, but we don't really see a ton from them. So anyway, Kings of Paradise was one of those books that I just absolutely flew through because the world was just so easy to grasp, like familiar, and yet just it was familiar, but it was deep, if that makes sense.
Well, it's like, that's kind of like good world building. I feel like it makes you look at things that are like around in the day-to-day, like through a new lens. Like if it makes you see something that you see every day and it makes you feel like it's the first time you've ever seen it, right? It's like, that's how it is,
Absolutely.
I really like the idea of having two cultures on like polar opposite ends of the planets that are just like completely inverted, not just like culturally, right? But also it's like the way like these, like the civilization or government is laid out, or even if it exists, but also environmentally.
Yes.
Like there's a whole thing about how environments like build, or influence human cultures, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and that's what I loved about it is just that you get to see, like, because this is a frozen wasteland, obviously the population is going to be smaller. They can't farm.
Yeah, of course.
It's very hunter gatherer, very limited warm season, if at all, some years. And so just getting to experience that and seeing the hardiness of those people because of that, versus kind of the soft, like, even though the tropical island, like, they have an army and they're really well trained, you can almost feel the softness of that because life is just a little bit more comfortable, as opposed to the frozen wasteland, which there's never a comfortable day. So like, yeah, it's a ton of fun to read that.
Out of curiosity, is it like Iron Age or like Bronze Age, or like what like type of like tech is this?
I would say that the civilization to the south, the frozen wasteland, is like very much a Iron Age, like, they have weapons, they have swords, but they're just not super advanced. So like they have some ships, but they don't really, have navies or anything like that. They don't really have armies. They're set up more like small clans that like don't necessarily get along. Whereas to the north, they have a entire fleet, like they have a naval fleet because they're an island community. So they have more advanced stuff that way. And they have more, they have more foods, they have more entertainment. So yeah, they have just a lot more development that way. But I would classify it more in I would say Iron Age, not industrialized quite at that point in the story.
Right.
But yeah.
Well,
which is also some of my favorite world building is my favorite worlds are the ones that are more in the kind of medieval era. So I'm a sucker for those types of stories.
There's a reason why it's stuck around for so long.
Yeah.
Like it's a classic.
Absolutely.
People like swords. I like swords,
I like swords. I like just base, battles. So yeah, it's pretty great.
Gotcha. Well, I don't know exactly. I almost want to say that one sounds better than Baslag. That's going to be tricky because Baslag's my favorite book ever. I don't know if I can I can't betray it, Well,
it's a tough one because we literally
they're not the same at all.
Yeah, we took two different sides of the, if we had both done breadth, we could have gone maybe more toe to toe on it.
But this is so different. It's not even like this is a complete like asymmetrical warfare type of situation.
Exactly.
People who've read it in the comments, you let them know. I'll read the book.
Maybe that's what we need to know. Is like what people prefer is do they prefer the depth of a city civilization, or do they prefer the breadth of a world in the world building? That's I think it's more of a preference thing, but it would be interesting to see. So they'll have to let us know in the comments on that.
Make a Perdido Street Station versus Kings of Paradise video at some point. I'll read the book. We'll figure it out.
There you go.
Okay. So next category is villains. Do you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah. So I took a little bit of a different approach to this, where I wanted to feature a book that I thought had just such deep characters as a whole, but didn't necessarily have traditional villains, heroes, in the sense of like the evil world conquering type of a villain. So I went with The Sword of Kaigen, which obviously is a very popular indie fantasy book. It won the SPFBO awards a few years back. So it's got a lot of traction on social media. A lot of people's favorites. But the thing that I liked about the villain for this book is really, it was, I guess, could be classified more as an anti-hero, where the villain is more of the societal structure of this civilization, where this people in this village are expected to protect this entire country from any outsiders. And yet, they are not very transparent with how they're progressing with technology. You could even make an argument that the husband in this book, Takeru, is a type of villain because he is kind of a harsh husband, and I don't want to spoil anything, but he makes choices that I think you could classify him as a villain or villainous behavior because of how he treats his wife, how he treats his sons, which is just very cold and distant. So yeah, I wanted to bring in a more, maybe a different perspective or approach to the villain by portraying it that way. Again, because listen, I knew going into this one, into the character section, that you were going to have a huge advantage. Yeah, because there are some great trad characters out there that I just don't. Indie, I think, can get there, but I think that competing toe to toe with like actual characters will be tough.
Yeah, it does. It does seem like indie kind of like right now it kind of edges out like in the world building department, just because you can do like anything, right? And you can just like get it out there where versus, but it's like for like character writing, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it's not quite as like fleshed out, or maybe I should say like refined. I don't want to say that's entirely true, because I've read a few things, or it feels like it has less. I guess I should say like iconic characters. Like there's not like a few characters that's like you think of when you think of like, oh, indie publishing as a whole, where it's like you think of trad publishing. It's like there's a few characters that everyone is going to think about.
Yep, you're going to think of Kaladin from the Stormlight Archive. You're going to think of Red Rising. Like there are just iconic characters, like you said, that are just always going to stick with people.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. I took another slightly alternative approach.
Nice.
So have you ever read Berserk by Kentaro Miura?
I feel like I have to, because I always see it on like TikTok and other things that like makes me want to either watch the show or read the books, but I haven't, but it is on my radar and I am familiar with it.
Right. So a lot of people like the very classic answer that a lot of people do with Berserk, like, people rank Berserk and they'll rank the main character Guts as like, oh, this is like, it's very common to be like, oh, top 10 character ever made. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they will put Griffith as like top 10, like villain ever made. Right.
Yes.
I thought it would be I thought it'd be a little bit too simple to just like say like, oh, Griffith is like the best villain. Right. Cause it's like, if you've read it, right. It's like he's one of the most like evil characters you can find in fiction. He's up there with like Judge Holden from Blood Meridian, right?
Yeah.
But what I wanted to delve into was something that's a little bit more unusually laid out. So Berserk goes through arcs, right? Instead of like books, you have chapters, you have books, right? But it's more, so you go by arcs, right? Different story lines and plot lines. And there's an arc called The Lost Children, right? Which is interesting because the entire arc is not from the perspective of the main character. It's from the perspective of a character who exists in that arc, and not before the arc and not after the arc, right? You can just read The Lost Children by itself because it just is from her perspective. And she's like, she's a really like young child, right? And so you basically see things completely like almost from zero from her perspective morality scale, right?
Gotcha.
And traditionally, an antagonist is, or a villain is, someone who moves into the story, makes things happen, disturbs the status quo, right? However, in this specific one, the main character Guts plays the narrative role of the villain, right? He is just covered in black metal, like he's often drawn more monstrous, like a hound, right? But if you look at it from like, oh, I've been through the whole story, he's still not the villain, right? The real villain of the arc almost looks like an angel. So Rosine is basically a very young person who grew up through like abuse, through misery, through like a mundane nightmare of a life that you can never escape. It's like, I will grow up and then nothing will happen and I will be trapped in this same cycle that I was, my parents were trapped in, that they've trapped me in. It's just like a mutual poison. And what she does essentially is she casts all of that away for the delusion of like living in a fantasy permanently, right? And so she believes in elves. She wants elves to be real, but there are no elves. There's destroyed groves and ruination. Everybody's like, oh, if the elves ever even existed, forest spirits, they are long gone, right? And so what she basically does is, through a pact with an entity of sorts, she becomes like her idea, her fantasy of an elf, and it starts permeating the woods and permeating the forest, and she takes children and turns them into things like her, right? She takes them from a mundane and banal world that is horrible and cruel, right? But she brings them, and it's like, so in her perspective, she's like saving them. I'm saving you from abuse, from bandits, from raiders, from war, from pestilence and famine. But she brings them into like a fantasia, like nightmare. It's like they're not human anymore. They're, the elves are like weird insectile monsters, right? And it is really warped and it is like twisted, and it's basically, she has her paradise and she slowly draws like children into it, and Guts comes into this thing and just, it's like, rip and tear. He's burning everything. It's a crazy plot line. It's fantastic. Rosine is really tragic, and it's interesting how like the villain once again looks like this kind of like angelic kind of moth creature, while the main character is the protagonist is like, once just a black metal wolf thing. And all of this is viewed through just a child's eyes the whole time. It's really fascinating. I love it so much. It's like, Berserk has, every arc is fantastic, but Lost Children for me will always stand at the very top just because of that.
I that is a great answer. I don't think I would have expected that answer or been able to compete with it, because one of the greatest storytelling tools is when you can warp the perspective of a villain. Like, as a reader, knowing that they're a villain, but them thinking that they're the hero. Like, I'm thinking of what was that book that had Malice by John Gwynne, where the villain thinks that they're the hero for most of the
complete delusion.
Complete delusion. We as a reader know that they're a villain, and we can see the things that they do are villainous. But one of the things I think makes a great villain is when they don't understand that they're a villain. Like you said, Griffith, you pretty much know that he's a villain. He probably knows
it's tricky, but it's like, it's like, generally speaking, it's like, most of the people who like read the story, it's like, Griffith is like, he's one of the most like despised characters that I know.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think that's a great pick.
Okay, next stage is heroes. What do you got?
Yeah, so again, I'm sticking with the Sword of Kaigen with this whole theme of these characters. So the hero for this one, I would pick as Misaki, who is the mother of and the wife in this story. So what's great about this is that this little village, again, they have some of the best warriors in the world, and they use ice magic to protect their entire country. The Sword of Kaigen is the peninsula that protects the rest of this country. So anyone that tries to attack has to go through this peninsula. And, there's not very many of these warriors. And so they're expected, like, maybe 50, 100 warriors to fend off thousands or of these potential warriors that are going to invade and those types of things. And the thing that I think makes Misaki one of the greatest heroes of the story is she has a hard time with her role in this society, because even though she's a great warrior, women just aren't supposed to fight.
Sure.
And so despite that, she kind of has this internal struggle where she's trying to know her place, and she's kind of accepted her place over the years. And it's not until a big conflict comes that she's forced to kind of confront the culture of this place versus the reality of, if I don't do something, all these bad things are going to happen. And so being able to see her step into that role and kind of progress with her emotions, just there's so much depth with her, because you see her internal conflict. And that's what really makes her a hero in my mind, is just the amount of internal depth that we get with her. We get to see just the turmoil that she faces as she's forced to watch her father and son go off to war, not knowing what's going to happen to them, and seeing, the potential failure of her family and what she's going to have to do as a result of that, versus the dialogue, which very little is actually said, because again, the culture doesn't allow them to say things. And so it's very much a hero of action, where she's just doing things because they are the right thing to do, even though she feels like they're wrong because of the cultural influence that
right. So there's like a disconnect between her own like psychological viewpoint and then like the broader culture as a whole.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just think it's very, very engaging to kind of see that more of an internal journey, as opposed to like a typical hero's journey where they get the artifact, they defeat the villain. I liked seeing a less typical hero in this particular story.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. Well, I don't know if I can go up against that one with what I picked. I hope I can. I think I should be able to. So the classic hero of like traditional fantasy, publishing is probably, it's like Frodo Baggins, Aragorn, the Fellowship of the Ring. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, we're gonna select something from Lord of the Rings, but I'm not gonna select Aragorn, and I'm not gonna select Frodo. Right? Have you read the Silmarillion by any chance?
I have not. That one intimidates me, so I don't know.
It's a little bit. I want to say it's easier to read now because it's composed of like a lot of different stories, a lot of different tales, right?
Right.
And some of those have been removed and like expanded upon, right? So it's like you don't have to read the whole Silmarillion these days. You can just read Beren and Luthien. You can just read The Fall of Gondolin, right?
Right.
And in my opinion, I love The Hobbit. I love The Lord of the Rings. In my opinion, the best thing to come from Tolkien, right, is bar none the Children of Húrin, right? So basically, the Children of Húrin is old story. Way back when the original Dark Lord was around and the Battle of Unnumbered Tears occurred, right? Yeah. So you have a man, Húrin, who gains the ire of the Dark Lord, right? Okay. And Melkor is, in essence, kind of an angel, almost a god, right? He's a supreme being, right? And Húrin, this mortal man, gains Melkor's ire to such a degree that he sacrifices a permanent portion of himself to curse Húrin's bloodline forever. Jeez. Right? And like, because that's kind of how Morgoth Melkor works, is he wants to create things and twist things, and as the story goes on, he becomes much weaker. So it's like early on in the Silmarillion, none dare face him, right? But by the end, because he's given so many parts of himself to his servants, to the Balrog, to the dragons, to the orcs, and all the varied like werewolves and other beasts, he's grown weaker. And it's interesting because he rarely divides himself, like he barely cuts a part of himself off, save to make some like insanely powerful, nasty creature, right? But this is one of the only times where he does it specifically to curse a individual person and their bloodline. And it's so petty and vindictive and evil. And the story, The Children of Húrin, is basically about the character Turin Turambar. In my opinion, one of the best characters that has come out of Tolkien's entire legendarium, right? He is arrogant and egotistical, right? Not like,
Okay.
or maybe I should say prideful. He has a very strong sense of like personal honor and personal code, but he's
Okay.
also quick to anger and wrath, right? So
Gotcha.
he goes through life, and there's a constant debate on like whether or not Morgoth's curse is real, or whether or not he himself drags like these things upon himself, right? So because sometimes it feels like chance, and sometimes it's a case of like, no, you didn't have to do that.
You're the problem. Yeah.
Right. And people still like debate this like on forums, right? Like what was him, what wasn't him, was the curse even real, was Morgoth, was this like a bluff? People talk about this, and it's interesting, but it really comes into play near the end of the story, right? Because I'm not gonna get into like specifics, right? Because I want like everyone to read this, of course, but by near the end, he gets tired, more or less, because it's like he's lived such a checkered life, so many ups and downs, and it feels like he's brought up only to have it hurt worse when he's dropped again, right? And it just kind of spirals towards this like inevitable conclusion. It's like, but it's like, can he escape this, right? Can he escape the curse that he wasn't even like around for when it was laid on his family, right? And this eventually results in a showdown between Turin and by far the most despicable like villain in Tolkien's legendarium, maybe. Glaurung the dragon, in my opinion, is more sinister than like the Witch King, more cruel than Smaug. Like he is a nasty, nasty, nasty dragon. He's one of the best dragons in like fiction, in my opinion.
Okay.
That's what I got basically.
So, and my question to that is this a short story? Like you said, the Silmarillion is compiled of a bunch of different short stories. So
yeah.
So this you picked as the greatest hero, and it's a short story. So that's interesting.
Well, it's like it was, and it's been like expanded upon, and more stuff has been brought into it. It's like, now it's its own thing. I don't know the exact word count for it right now. I don't have it on the top of my head. I can bring it up.
That's interesting though. I like to hear that, because again, one of the cool things about talking about different mediums, like Berserk as a different style, or this one kind of in a short story format, is that you can get these great characters in so many different formats. Like if you're doing a good job as a writer, you can build a great character in any format, whether it's a manga, anime, short story,
a movie,
400,000 word book. Like, it's about what you're doing with the characters that really makes an impact. So I like that you chose that, because I like being able to feature different formats like that.
Right. He's interesting because it's a case of like, there's the kind of like archetypal thing that Tolkien favored a lot of the time, but it becomes like curious, because some of the characters in the Silmarillion, he blends like psychological things into it a little more like than in the Lord of the Rings. I want to say, not to say like psychology isn't an important factor with certain characters in the Lord of the Rings, but like the Children of Hurin, it's like Turin. It's like, oh, it's like a guy who, if he was born in a different, like he was a hero of his age, but it's like if he was born during the time, like the Third Age, right? Like in Gondor, it's like it's like like Denethor would have never been the steward, because Turin would have like thrown him off the top of like Minas Tirith immediately, right? And it's like if he was in Rohan, Grimo never would have spoken to the king, because Turin probably would have just like hacked him apart, because he didn't. It's like he there's a problem, and he just, the quickest possible route, no matter what gets damaged along the way, and that makes him so many enemies. But it's just like, he still does what's needed to be done, even though. But he's not like 100% utilitarian either, because then he has the pride and the like, the whole honor thing that he's got going, and it's just like I need to reread it, because I still like, it feels like anytime I've looked at it, there's always like some new way or something I missed before that recontextualizes something.
Yep, that's another thing that makes great characters is just that there's so much depth that with each time you reread it, you pick something else new from them is a great sign that you've built
Yeah.
a great, because there are some books where like you said, the characters like are iconic, but you don't really get
That's a thing.
as
It's a
much
thing.
depth as you
Sometimes
reread
they're
it.
just iconic because they got a cool silhouette, you know, versus like
Yes.
they're iconic because it's like there's so much there.
Yes, absolutely. So that's oh, I think listen, like I said, I knew characters was going to be a tough one going into
Yeah.
this, but you can't compete with Lord of the Rings or J.R.R. Tolkien.
It's hard. It's really
That's
hard.
like even his side works of the Silmarillion, which I
Yeah.
haven't even read, sound epic. So yeah, that's pretty brutal.
Mm.
and and then I think that I feel like we could probably talk about characters like for another hour if we wanted to, but for the sake of time, I think that we should say that characters. There's so much that you can do with characters. Like we could talk about side
Yeah.
characters, we could talk about the morally gray characters, we could talk about the anti-heroes and stuff. There's just so much depth that I feel like we have to move on from this topic because
Yeah, no worries.
I feel like we could talk about this for an hour
No, 100%.
on just character.
No, yeah, 100%.
And I feel like I'm losing, so that's why I also have to switch the topic.
No worries, no worries. So the next one is magic systems. If I am recalling from my list, what do you got on this one? I feel like Indy's got some crazy stuff.
Oh man, Indy, holy cow!
I mean, I know it's got some crazy.
I could go again for an hour on the magic systems that I've read, and I've only just barely started my journey of reading exclusively indie books, and I have been so impressed by the quality of magic that is being shown in these stories. But the one that I chose is from Petition by Delilah Wan.
I've not heard of that one.
It's one that I've read recently. She is from Australia. It's an Asian inspired fantasy. By far, one of the best hard magic systems I've ever read. And I would put this up against any trad published magic system that exists. That exists because it is it's complex, yet it's understandable. And it doesn't hold your hand and lets you experience the magic as you go along. And the magic system is basically based on emotion, which when I first heard that, like when it was being, when I read the synopsis and stuff, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about a magic, like how's that going to work? A magic system based on emotion. But essentially it's just so creative because let's say that something happens, like a crime is committed, people are able to trace the essence of the emotions that were felt in that moment and trace it back to the source. Like it's so cool. And like there's like 6 different elements that are that, and it's hard magic. So she explains exactly how these things work, which I can't remember in a lot of depth right now, but you can track into the future as well by tracing people's decisions and emotional paths that they're more likely to take. But also like there's an empathic level to the magic system as well, where like you can look into a person's I guess soul or their heart, and based off of their emotions they can see like the truth of what they're saying. So it was just so cool to see how and you can throw up emotional barriers so that people can't track you. And so there's like all these like checks and balances to the magic system. So like not one element is more cool or more powerful than another. All of them work cohesively together. The magic system is just integrated with their society is the other cool thing. But the only way that you can develop your magic is if you're sponsored by one of the great houses of this village, of this town. And if you're not able to develop your magic, like you just don't have the time or the resources to like build that skill. So you end up like a peasant fishing on the docks for the rest of your life, even though you have some ability to that you could nurture. Whereas like the more, and that's where the politics get involved in the magic system as well, where if you're part of a rich family, you're more likely to get chosen as part of these games that they have to do. So just, I like it when the magic system is integrated with the world. And a lot of books that I read, like one person will have magic, like the chosen one has magic, or the villain has magic and no one else does, and that's what sets them apart. But it's so cool to see when everyone has magic, or at least maybe has an opportunity to experience it, but whether or not that can be developed and what your skill level is. And it just was so much fun to read. It was complicated. Like there were some times where I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And you just have to trust that it gets explained, which it does. But yeah, I really, really loved that as a magic system.
That's an interesting one. Okay. Well, I like how you took the case of, the magic's integrated with the world, because I took a different approach. So the magic system that I selected is like fully integrated with character, and like it's like full like psychological thing. So Nen from Hunter x Hunter. It is a manga written by Togashi, Yoshihiro Togashi. It is a lot. It's another hard system. It is complicated sometimes to the point of like frustration and tears, right? But more than anything, the thing I like is I love asymmetry in a magic system, right? So I like it when like different characters will have different ways they use it, and it'll be like completely different like to them, right?
Okay, yeah.
Sometimes it obviously it works if like there's like overall like rules to it, right? But it's like it almost makes every single fight some type of weird puzzle solving dynamic, or an interesting case of like character psychology, right?
Okay.
The fundamental like components of Nen is it's an aura type. You have an essence, you have an aura, you have an energy, right? And that energy can be refined into different things. Now, based on your psychology, your spirit, your natural tendencies, you can be applied one of 6 different like ways that the aura will like naturally be used to. It's like what you're naturally talented with. It's like you can so it's like, I can conjure something with it, I can enhance something, I can manipulate something, so on and so forth, right?
Okay.
And basically you use that to build out some type of ability, right?
Gotcha.
But it becomes really interesting in terms of packs and restrictions. The entire magic system is based around putting like restrictions on yourself that then increase the potency of whatever it is you do, right?
Interesting.
So there's basically a character who they have they have a pact with themselves to like, the only reason that I'm like on this planet, the only reason I exist is to like avenge a few of like my family members, right? I have to kill the 13 legs of the spider, right?
Gotcha.
It's like a group of thieves and murderers. And so he limits himself to such an extent that it's like I can almost not even use it at all unless it's on these specific people, right? And so it's like he increases the potency of his things, but then even further, he basically adds another restriction where if he hits a certain emotional threshold, right? Like a certain type of like just like euphoria, rage, pain, all of that, like when he's like dealing with them, that then triggers a secondary effect, right? And that secondary effect, if I'm recalling, it's like for every hour or for every 10 minutes he's alive, 1 year of his life vanishes, right?
Jeez.
And it's so like kind of frightening and alien, like what people do. Because some people, it's a case of like, I use this to throw a rock really hard, right? But then there's some people who do things that are like really alien and frightening, and there's another character whose only thing that they do with them is they twist people's minds with like needles that they infuse with their own essence, right? So you plunge a few needles into people's heads and you can puppet them and so on and so forth. There's another character who, when they eat, like this person's like not borderline, not a human. It's like a weird basically there was a colony of ants that ate someone who could use this magic system, right? And it basically triggered like the ants basically refine themselves over multiple life cycles until they create something that's basically like a super being, right?
Interesting.
And this thing, when it eats people, it basically eats their aura, their soul, their essence, the spirit, the part of them that's them, and takes it into itself, right? And basically, it's like that's more simplistic. But even then, it's like the fact that every character has all of these type of weird psychological things that the magic system ties into. That's what I really love about it.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. And let me ask you, do you like, because I know you read a lot of manga and you do a lot of reviews on your channel on those types of things. Do you like the leveling up style of magic systems?
Normally no. Like I like it if there's like, do you mean like it's like, oh, I get like a video game level, like
oh, I'm a level, I'm a level A hero now. Like when I think about animes like One Punch Man, for example, like they're tiered into certain abilities. Like and a lot of
it's like sometimes it's like it's really easy for it to just be like, oh, this is a video game and I'm just gonna have a higher number that wins. And I think that's like the worst possible outcome for it.
Yes. Okay.
With a story like The Wandering Inn, there's like, I think The Wandering Inn is like the best case of a leveling magic system that exists. It's like, it gets like, oh yeah, you have levels, and then anytime you level, you get skills, right? And those skills are, it's like there's enough skills and enough levels and enough different types of things that it doesn't feel like, oh, this guy who's just leveled is like the best thing you'll ever see, right? It's like there's more complexity to that. Sometimes there's like a psychological element that's interesting. Sometimes there's a case of like people lying and like bluffing, which is kind of interesting. As long as it's not just like the higher number is the thing and that's it, I'm okay with that. But if it becomes just a case of make the number higher, it's like that is a nightmare. I hate that. But like a magic system that evolves and changes, I think that's why progression fantasy and like cultivation fantasy are so big right now, because people, like in Mistborn, allomancy is, generally speaking, it's allomancy. It's not it doesn't change, and like it's not built to. And sometimes like when things are introduced, like maybe the recent Stormlight book, when things are introduced, sometimes it feels like, oh, that didn't like that kind of came out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
It's like versus like a cultivation or progression style of fantasy magic system, which is built to expressly evolve and change with the character, which it's like, Nen is kind of like that, but not in the same way, right?
Yeah.
You can put extra restrictions and there's other psychological aspects that'll come into play, but like a specifically like leveling or progression or cultivation style magic system, it is about like the evolution. It is about the change. It's about improving and continually like going upward. And it's cool. I like it.
Like, because I'm torn, because sometimes I like it, but sometimes I have a really hard time with.
It's really easy to mess with it, I think.
Yeah,
make it more good. Like it's really easy.
Because I like like Mistborn as an example. I like when the magic exists and then the character has to learn the magic system.
Yeah.
As opposed to like continually like
it's always
evolving and growing. Yeah. Like, yes, like in a story like Mistborn, they're learning and they're developing more skills and they're getting creative ways to use that system. I like that because I feel like it's more limited. And maybe that's what I prefer in magic systems, is like limited magic that has consequences, that has costs, that you can learn and get good at, but that doesn't seemingly have this like endless cycle of like continual progression where like something like, for example, Unsouled has kind of that system where like, oh, you can be anywhere within the scale if you're a wood chip or if you're a metal chip, like you can be a certain, it's not like if you have this chip, you're equal to everyone else with that chip. You still have to be a skilled user in that specific category. But like, that's an example of, I think, someone that does it well. But it is interesting to hear, because like you said, it's very popular. Like the manga style of magic systems and the progression and cultivation magic is very popular. But I think my preference leans more towards the traditional magic systems, I think. Like, because I like soft magic systems too. Like, it doesn't even
they're
have to be explained. But I like the, I guess, limitations to some, which is why I think what you explained with Hunter x Hunter is actually interesting, because you're explaining how they are specifically limiting their magic so that they can do certain things to certain people. And I think that actually is a good way to approach it.
So, and then for the last one, plot. What do you got?
Yeah. So this one is tough because I didn't want to do any spoilers, and a lot of times what makes a plot is how a book ends. Because obviously there's going to be pacing, there's going to be the prose that's used in the plot that makes it good, the characters, like all these things build into it. But the book that I chose is The Lost War by Justin Anderson. And this one, it got picked up by traditional publishing, if that is any indication of how good this was when it was originally self-published. But the setup and the twists and the mystery just create such a growing sense of unease and suspense throughout the entire book. Like, something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And like, I didn't get, until I reached the end of the book, I didn't realize how well this plot developed. It's one of those books that I have to reread now. And because like I was reading like the first quarter, maybe 30% of the book, and the whole time I'm thinking like, dude, you were given a task to go from this point A to point B. And all along the way, you're just getting distracted and like, you're just go to point B. Like, I was getting so frustrated with this character and with this group of characters. I'm like, so like from a plot perspective, I'm like, this has no plot because you're not doing the task of the whole premise of the book, which is how it's set up. The very first chapter is, hey, go do this thing. We need this to progress the story forward.
Right.
And then he just, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And it's just super annoying as a reader. But like you get, like I said, there's hints of like something is wrong here. Like something is going on. There's a reason that these distractions are happening, that we don't know what's going on. And it's very rare when I feel like I couldn't guess the ending to a story. Just because like a lot of fantasy books follow the same format. And that's not a bad thing. I like the format of fantasy books, obviously. But seeing such a creative story structure and twist was just so much fun to read. And I loved the entire plot of this book. And it's one of those series. He's written 2 other books so far. I think it's a 4-book series. And it's one that I'm like aching to keep reading because it was just structured so well.
Once again, it seems we have selected opposites. Out of curiosity, so it's one of those that you got to do the reread almost, because it's like there's all those like things that are like hidden and like where do you think we're at in the story? Like, did he like complete it, or is it like
it's definitely you have to read the series because it ends on a cliffhanger. It ends on like a pit of your stomach kind of a feeling where you're like, oh my gosh, everything just clicks together and you're like, I can't believe this happened and how he pulled this off. So it feels like a complete story, but it ends on almost a sour note where you're like, oh my gosh, like there's so much work to do type of a feeling. And like it almost feels like a prologue as a book. If a book was a prologue, this would be it. Like, it feels like it just was this huge setup. And then like the end of the book is like, okay, actually this is where we need to start from. And it's like, oh my gosh. So that's what I really enjoyed about it.
And he's doing more, or is it like,
yeah, so he's written 2 more that are done. And I think he said that it was going to be a 4-book series. So I think he's currently writing the last book in the series. So it's not finished, but the pace that he finished books 2 and 3, I feel like it's a pretty trustworthy. I mean, you can never fully trust an author with an unfinished series, I feel like, these days, but I'm very optimistic that he'll finish this one.
Interesting. That's a good one. That's a really stellar one. Mine is, I don't know if I'm actually going to win this one. I want to say I am, but so I selected The Dark Tower by Stephen King.
That's a great pick.
So have you read it?
I have. Okay.
Well, so it's like, it's a case of like, for those of you who don't know, The Dark Tower is, it's like almost as unusual fantasy as you can get. It's like, it's got world hopping. It's got weird types of like multi-dimensional travel, different types of magic systems and monsters and plot lines overlaid on top of each other. You got people from the 1980s America teaming up with basically the Knights of Arthur Eld if they were gunslingers, right, to find the Dark Tower itself. The Dark Tower, it's not like it's plotted how Stephen King plots, right, which is a case of he just writes, right, which means you can have books like Middle Book Syndrome and the Dark Tower. It's a thing. Like for the entirety of Wolves of the Kala, the characters are sitting in one town, not doing much, not a lot is going on, right?
Yeah.
But even then, I think because the plot is so uniquely laid out and how it takes you towards that ending, it's like there's nothing like it for good and bad. Like the ending of the Dark Tower, there's parts of it that to this day still piss me off. But the things I like about it, I like too much that it doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
So it's like there's nothing that there's very few books or stories out there that I will love as much as the Dark Tower, and like, but then there's like a few things where I'm like, I'm on the verge of tears with how angry I am at like some of the. It's like, did you not think at all that this was like a good idea or a bad idea?
Yes.
But the good is so good that it's like it doesn't even matter, and it just kind of makes the conversation about it more interesting, especially when you take into account some of his other stories that are like connected to the Dark Tower. It's really fascinating.
So for you and the Dark Tower, is it the high highs that make the plot like worthwhile for you?
It's like the high highs. It's a case of like it kind of feels just like a natural progression versus like we have to hit the plot points that have to be hit, right? It's like I didn't know Wolves of the Collar we would just hang out in one town for an entire book, but it's like, oh, like it kind of makes sense in hindsight, like not maybe not 100%, but it's like, oh, that sure, yeah, let's do that. Oh, an entire book that's a flashback, sure, why not? Let's do that, right? It's like I didn't. Like, I don't know, like, I know where we're going, but it's like, I never know what twist or turn will happen and how we'll get there and what thing will like, become like the important, like massive plot point. Like, I think one of the most like, they go through the Wizard of Oz world at one point, like, so, and it's like, but it doesn't feel like unnatural or forced. Like even the things that happen out of left field and kind of suck, it's still like, yeah, that would happen in this world, right? It's like there's never like the plot never there's nothing that is like forced to happen by the plot, right? Because we have to get to this plot point. It's just like things just happen, characters just kind of live, really horrible things just happen,
Well, that's one of the great things about discovery writers like Stephen King is I feel like it just allows the story to develop in a natural way that we can feel as the readers, because we're basically following the characters' natural choices in these worlds, which again doesn't necessarily follow a rigid plot structure that is predictable and sometimes maybe a little stale because of that. So yeah, I could definitely see the case for that.
What do you got? Oh wait, no, that's it. That's literally it, isn't it? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I think that covered pretty much all of the different categories of trad versus indie.
So, yeah, well, I mean, in terms of like overall, I think it's a case of like I love indie published stuff. I love weird web serials. I like the random books that you can find published wherever you're looking for them. I like all of it, right? It's like I think it's all great. And I think it's like the stuff you can find in indie nowadays, the rising quality, the rising uniqueness, the rising people just like I can just do whatever I want and just make it, and it's just out there, right? And it's a case of like you can do anything, and it's also I think that means that you can lay out plot, you can lay out story in ways that like fundamentally you just couldn't before. You couldn't have seen before. You couldn't have wrote The Wandering Inn 100 years ago. You couldn't have written I don't know if a story like the Sword of Kaigen would have gotten published like 50 years ago, right? And it's like that through like all the different layers. That said, it's like my opinion is like you won't find something like Baslag or Dark Tower in indie publishing yet.
Yep. I
But
agree.
we're close. We're so close. Like it's like a couple, like a year or two, and we'll like boom, we'll be there.
I think that that's what makes this such an interesting conversation. Because if you take the best of the best, I think trad wins in almost every category because it's been around longer. They've had more time to develop in pop culture. And the quality is a lot higher sometimes because they have to go through so many gatekeepers in order to publish. But like you said, the great thing about indie publishing is the fact that you eliminate the gatekeepers, like the book agents and the publishers for all of this time are looking for books that are going to make them money. What is going to sell? What format can we, like, I think of like the Marvel universe as an example where like it gets done to death because it sells. Like people will go buy a ticket even though it's slop, basically. It's the same story, it's the same stuff over and over again. And it's entertaining, but it's not original. And one of the things that I love about indie publishing is because we've eliminated those gatekeepers and eliminated the business side of publishing. It's just people writing what they're passionate about. And obviously these people, I'm sure, want to be successful, make money on their books. But you just get that sense of passion of like, wow, I don't have to write this for a business. I don't have to write
it's like someone's just like opens up their computer, writes something. Is like, I'm just going to focus on the writing, ignore everything else.
Yes.
And that'll kind of result in something that could be like, it's like, it could be messy. It could be unrefined.
Yep.
But the stuff you will find out there, it's unlike anything like else. It's like good, bad, everything.
Exactly. So that's my plug for indie publishing and indie fantasy is you'll get, it'll be a less polished version maybe of fantasy books that you're used to, but in my opinion, the creativity and originality is worth the trade-off in that sense.
100% agree. Well, if that's that, then let us know in the comments down below what you guys think. Like and subscribe, do all the things. If you want to say anything.
Well, if you want to see more indie fantasy content, feel free to check out my channel, Indie Fantasy Club. But I really just appreciate you having me on and having this conversation. So I just appreciate that.
And if you guys want to see a part 2 to this video, it will be dropping over on his channel, and it will be horror versus fantasy. I will be repping the horror, nasty, ghouly monsters and detectives, and he will be the stupid dragon knights, all that stuff. Seriously, guys, check out the Indie Fantasy Club. Like, I know you guys love indie published stuff, web series, all of it. He has fantastic in-depth reviews, good writing advice, tips for publishing, anything you could want. It's all there. Just check it out, seriously. And with that, this has been Mariner. I'm signing off. I'll see you when I see you, people. Have a good night.